In a time long ago, there was a king, and this king had been a practitioner of meditation for many years, practicing a particular form. But this king had a spiritual advisor, and the king learned that his spiritual advisor was practicing a higher form of meditation than his. So he called his spiritual advisor to him and demanded that he be taught the form of meditation that the spiritual advisor was practicing. And the spiritual advisor said, "Your Majesty, you have to have the proper authority." And the king got very angry. He said, "I've been practicing meditation for many years. Surely I'm suitable and ready to practice this higher form of meditation." The spiritual advisor says, "Majesty, let me demonstrate for you." He said to the king, "Please call the sentry who is standing guarding your door." So the king called the sentry over to him, and the sentry stood between the king and the spiritual advisor. The spiritual advisor turned to the sentry and said, "Slap the king's face." The sentry stiffened, pursed his lips, and kept his hands tightly at his side. And then the spiritual advisor said to the king, "Now you tell the sentry to slap my face." And immediately the sentry obliged and gave the spiritual advisor a good whack across his cheeks. King said, "Not so hard, not so hard." Then the spiritual advisor said, "You see, Your Majesty, because you're the king and you have the authority, you were obeyed. But I, merely as your spiritual advisor, have not the authority, so it was not obeyed." It is the same in spiritual terms. One must have the proper authority. What is this proper authority? In times past, there were those spiritual societies in which there were initiations, ceremonies, rites of passage, preparations clearly laid down. And afterwards, it was very evident that one had reached another plane, become an adept, an initiate. But we who are living our lives as ordinary beings, how do we know what this proper authority is? This is what we're going to explore together in these few short days together. How do we know we've become an initiate? How do we know we're an adept if there's not been this formal rite of passage? This is what it is that we will explore over these short days together. But before we do so, there's a little test for you. In olden times, in a particular secret society, there was the initiation practice after great preparation, fasting, and so forth, that one who was to be initiated was taken to a chamber, a sealed chamber, unlit. And in that chamber there was sufficient air for 3 days and 3 nights. The initiate was placed inside this room and left in the darkness. It's asked of you, what would you do when placed in this unlit, darkened room with 3 days and 3 nights of air? What are our options? Would you breathe rapidly to get it over and done with quickly? Would you chant mantras? Would you call on a higher power? This is a test for you. What would you do? Placed in this unlit room, air sufficient only for 3 days and 3 nights, without any ability to know day or night. What would you do? This question is left with you. But in finding your answer, we'll resolve this question that's been posed. What is this proper authority? Then we can claim our adeptship. We can call ourselves initiates. But to be an adept or an initiate is to be like an astronaut in a space capsule, blasted out of the field of gravity, out of that place where we know the laws of life and we know how to use them, into a space where those laws no longer apply. We can no longer function in the way that we have before. If we do, as no doubt many of you have experienced, we have frustration, we have angst. In that outer space, where we know an astronaut becomes weightless, different laws apply. And so there's no doubt all of us who are here have experienced this angst, this frustration, because we have not accepted our adeptship. The fact that we've been blasted into another dimension of being where the laws that were working before for us no longer work. Simple in days of old, when there were the ceremonies, the rites of passage. We don't have them. So what is this proper authority? Let's find out together, if you dare. But first, attempt to answer this question. What would you do in this unlit, enclosed room? "3 days and 3 nights. of air and